We've had a good rapport with SPNN and SCC in our online programs, so thanks to them. And you can watch previous programs in a created playlist on our YouTube channel by searching League of Women Voters of St. Paul. By now, many of us are very familiar with Zoom. So if in the course of the presentation you have a question, please type it into the Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. And as always, please forgive any error that you get from the closed captioning feature. To begin today, I want to share with you a joint statement that was issued by the League of Women Voters of Minnesota and the League of Women Voters of the U.S. strongly opposing the deployment of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Minneapolis and St. Paul. That statement reads, "The League of Women Voters of Minnesota condemns the decision to deploy ICE agents to our communities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Minnesota's immigrant communities are integral to the economic strength, social fabric, and cultural vibrancy of our state. Federal actions that create fear, fracture families, and erode trust in local institutions are unacceptable and fundamentally at odds with the values that sustain a healthy and functioning democracy. The League of Women Voters of Minnesota stands unwaveringly with immigrants, refugees, and all members of our community who deserve safety, dignity, and equal treatment under the law. We believe in the rule of law, due process, and fair administration of justice must be upheld for every person. These principles are threatened when federal enforcement tactics intimidate communities, suppress civic participation, or deter individuals from accessing essential public services, participating in civic life, or exercising their constitutional rights. We urge federal authorities to immediately reconsider this deployment. We further call on local, state, and national leaders to prioritize policies that safeguard civil liberties, strengthen community trust, and ensure that every Minnesotan, regardless of immigration status, can live, work, and participate fully in our democracy without fear. As always, the League remains committed to defending democracy and advancing a more just, inclusive, and representative Minnesota." To begin, I want to speak a little bit about immigrants in our community. Immigrants are our family, our friends, and our neighbors. They're human beings who have inherent rights and dignity, and they are important contributors to our community. I've pulled some demographics and statistical information put out by the city of St. Paul. This data is from 2019. And in 2019, over 60,000 immigrants lived in St. Paul, making up almost 20% of the total city's population. This is less in comparison to the total number of immigrants who lived in Minnesota, over 475,000, and they make up about 8.5% of the population. So between 2014 and 2019, the population of St. Paul increased by 4.4%, but 62.4% of that total growth was attributable to immigrants. So they are coming to St. Paul and bringing vibrancy to us. So although the foreign-born population of St. Paul is 19.9% of our overall population, they are 24.2% of our working age population and 17% of our STEM workers. And again, this is 2019 numbers. In 2019, immigrant households in St. Paul earned $1.3 billion, and $182.7 million of that went to federal taxes, and another $120.6 million went to state and local taxes. And if we want to talk specifically about the undocumented immigrant population, in 2019, there were 7,400 undocumented immigrants in St. Paul. They made up 12% of the foreign-born population, but they are highly active in our labor force, and approximately 93.9% of them were working age in the city. And even though they are undocumented, they also contribute to our communities and to our economy. They earned over $159 million in 2019, paid over $12 million in federal taxes, and another $7.6 million again in state and local taxes, leaving $139.9 million in spending power to spend here in our communities of St. Paul. talking about the immigrants and what they bring to our communities, economically vibrant in our communities, I want to talk now about Susan Tincher. Susan was one of the first Minnesotans who was a constitutional observer to be detained by ICE officers in Minneapolis on Tuesday, December 9th. We had invited Susan to come join us today and speak with us. Unfortunately, she was unavailable. But she did ask us to share a statement that she had shared as part of an ACLU lawsuit, specifically fighting against the deployment of federal ICE officers in our communities. So I would like to read Susan's statement for you all. My name is Susan Tincher. I live in Minneapolis. I have lived here for 30 years. My husband and I raised our children here. This is my neighborhood. On the morning of December 9th, I woke up just after 6 a.m. to alerts that an ICE arrest was happening in North Minneapolis. Within minutes, I got dressed, got in my car, and drove a few blocks to see what was happening in my community. I want to start by emphasizing how fast everything happened. From the moment I arrived at 21st and Oliver to the moment I was on the ground in handcuffs was about 15 seconds. That is not an exaggeration. 15 seconds. There was no warning, no explanation, no chance to comply. I was on a public street. I did not cross any line or interfere with anything. I asked a single question. Are you ICE? When I was told to get back, events escalated almost immediately. Within seconds, officers rushed me, grabbed me, and slammed me face first into the snow. I did not even have time to take my phone out of my pocket. I want to talk about fear, because that matters. Lying face down in the snow with masked officers on top of me, no names, no visible badges, guns everywhere, I was genuinely afraid I was being kidnapped. That is not drama. That is what it felt like in my body. I yelled for help because I did not know if anyone would ever see me again. People will understandably be upset about what happened to me once I was taken to the Whipple building. I was put in shackles. I was held for 5 hours. Some of my clothing was cut off and my wedding ring was cut from my finger. I am upset about those things too. But I want to be very clear. The violence began on the street. It began with how quickly and forcefully I was taken down for doing nothing more than observing, asking a question, and standing where I had every legal right to stand. This is not a hobby for me. I was not there for excitement. I was not there to provoke. I was not there to play activist. I went because ICE activity was happening before dawn in a residential neighborhood when most people were asleep, and I believed someone should bear witness. This is part of a larger effort by neighbors, attorneys, journalists, and organizations like the ACLU to gather information about what the government is doing in our communities. That work matters. Transparency matters. Observation matters. What happened to me sends a message. It says that even calm presence on a public street can be met with sudden, overwhelming force. It says that fear is being used as a tool. And it says that if this can happen to me, a middle-aged white woman with deep roots in this city, then we need to ask very hard questions about what is happening to people with far less protection. While I was held, I watched young Latino men in shackles being led away. I thought about their families. I thought about how they might disappear without anyone knowing where they were. That perspective has stayed with me. I am standing here today not because I want attention, but because what happened was wrong, and because silence would make me complicit. I did not obstruct. I did not disobey. I did not provoke violence. I was on a public street, and what followed was sudden, brutal, and terrifying. And I am here because documenting that truth clearly, calmly, and together is how movements protect people. Thank you. And I want to thank Susan for sharing that statement with us. As I mentioned, Susan's detention happened in December, And at that time, I think many of us were duly shocked by the treatment she received and how her presence there on a public street was responded to by ICE officials. So much has happened since that day in early December. I struggled to put this slide together, trying to capture everything that has happened in Minnesota in just the last 2 weeks. Since what they're calling Operation Metro Surge has begun, we have received reports that nearly 3,000 federal agents have been deployed to Minnesota. And the federal government says that they have done over 2,500 detentions. And as we all know, Renee Nicole Good was killed by an ICE officer on January 7th, 2026, in her neighborhood in Minneapolis. After that, protests have erupted across Minnesota, and we continue to see ICE action throughout our communities. School attendance has dropped, and several metro school districts are offering the option of online learning. People are afraid to go to school. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to go out in their communities and get groceries. Now, as some relief, on Friday, this past Friday, a federal judge issued an order barring immigration agents from retaliating against persons who are engaging in peaceful and unobstructed protest activity. It remains to be seen how that order will be carried out by ICE agents across Minnesota. So I want to now take the opportunity to transition to the speaker that we're most interested in hearing from today. Her name is Louica Alexandre, and she is from the Advocates for Human Rights. The Advocates for Human Rights is a nonpartisan, non-governmental international human rights organization. And Louica is going to speak to us about knowing your rights as an advocate and an ally. Louica, I'm going to hand it to you to take it away.
Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here and being interested in knowing your rights and how to better help your neighbors and your community. So my name's Louica. I am a staff attorney with the Advocates for Human Rights. And I'm gonna briefly talk about our agenda today. We can go on to the next slide, please. So we'll have a little bit of an introduction, which Melissa already provided, of our organization, so we can just skip that part. But then we're gonna speak about Minneapolis and current stats, which Melissa also already spoke about a little bit, but I'll still go over and not take too much time on that. And then give a little bit of an Immigration Basics 101 in terms of agencies and how they work in the immigration system, and then talk about changes in policy, some news, and how that impacts the different communities, immigrant communities here, and how Minnesota and the nonprofits in particular are responding. And then we'll go into the Know Your Rights. So I might try to go a little bit quickly given the time range, but we'll do my best to still give these topics the time that they deserve. So we can go into the next slide and past that. So a little bit of current statistics. That was a few months ago, like Melissa already spoke about, but about 495,000 foreign-born Minnesotans make up which make up 9% of the population, and there are approximately 81,000 undocumented individuals in Minnesota, and 39,000 around 39,000 of those folks are in removal proceedings at the Fort Snelling Immigration Court. Removal proceedings just means court, and you're in the process of having a judge hear about your immigration journey and the applications that you have in course. And there's about 3,000 case backlog due to um, there being so many folks, and also especially with the Trump administration right now, who are um, firing immigration judges that are not uh, up to their standards, meaning harsh enough, or to the to to the folks in detention or in removal proceedings, and so that contributes a lot to the case backlog as well. Can go forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about basic immigration structures in terms of the agencies and what uh, non-citizens and especially new arrivals are expected to know as they're coming into the United States. So we can go on to the next one. So we have around 5 immigration agencies with the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. So firstly, I'm going to talk about USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. And this is the agency that makes decisions on applications for asylum. And when I say applications for asylum, I mean the affirmative applications for asylum, which means this is for folks who are not in immigration proceedings, meaning immigration court, and for folks who are processing their asylum applications in immigration court, it's called defensive because you kind of have to defend your position versus affirmatively, meaning you're not in court and the government hasn't had giving you a charging document, which is called a notice to appear, for you to present yourself at court. And it contains the charges that the government has against you. And so folks who have not been issued a notice to appear are with USCIS, including children as well. So USCIS makes decisions on applications for asylum, lawful permanent residence, which is the green card, naturalization, employment authorization, which is your work permit, and other immigration status. Then we have CBP, which is the Customs and Border Patrol, which enforces immigration laws at the U.S. borders and ports of entries, for example, the airports. And then there's ICE, Immigration Customs and Enforcement. And ICE enforces immigration laws in the interior of the United States, including they're in charge of detention, prosecution, which is the attorneys at immigration court, and deportation. And we have the OR, Office of Refugee and Resettlement, which administers programs to resettle refugees and oversee unaccompanied children. So when children come in through the border without their parents, they are put into shelters, and then they're released to a guardian, and this process goes through the Office of Refugee and Resettlement. And then finally, we have the EOIR, which is the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which includes the Immigration Court and the Board of Immigration Appeals, which are in charge of making decisions, judging on adjudicating the removal or deportation cases. And I don't have the time to go into specifically how these all are separate and when certain things apply to them, but this is just something that each non-citizen is expected to know and is able to navigate, because and that is a lot to ask because there's so many things happening at once, and you would have to know which of these agencies you're supposed to be sending your applications to. How do you send these applications to? What documents you need for these applications? These are not spelled out for you, and especially for someone who comes in with a language barrier, that is a lot to know and understand how these agencies work together and where to apply. So we can go on to the next slide. Uh, I want to talk here a little bit about the triple trauma paradigm that, which in a sense is the journey that a lot of immigrants go through before coming into the United States. And I just want to preface that before we talk about the changes in policy. So, the hardship that these folks endure before arriving in the United States, dealing with the different policy changes and how that works in immigration. So, firstly, you have, the experiences in their home country, which may involve dealing with threats, torture, folks who have been tortured, lacking medical care, and repeated relocation when you're trying to, find a safe space in your home country and you're not able to. So then, after experiencing all of these hardships, you decide to journey into the United States. And so throughout your journey, we have had at the Advocates a lot of clients go through 5 different countries before coming in here, and that involves them walking or taking the bus. And during that time, you have to deal with illness and malnutrition, lack of funds, separation from your family, threats because you're a vulnerable population. And so um, subject to discrimination in the road, threats from criminal gangs, and targeted asylum seekers. And so these are all of the things that they've experienced before finally coming into the United States. And then while you're here in the United States, your life in the US, you have lack of legal status. And when you come here, for example, asylum is a sort of status, but it really uh, is not too protective of you because you can still get detained. And once you come to the United States, for example, for asylum, you don't have a job and you need to wait at least 180 days after you apply for asylum to be able to apply and to receive your work permit card. And so that's around 6 months, which is very hard. So you're dealing with a lack of status, low socioeconomic status, and having news from home and being isolated. You may not have support from your family, uh, and you have to take care of your kids. Or if you're a 16-year-old or even a 13-year-old coming here by yourself, you don't really have much in terms of support. So we can go ahead and move on. So while dealing with all of these, you're dealing with changes in immigration policy and practices. And I'm going to just give a snapshot of some things that are going on right now. So you come here, for example, you come here legally as a student. So you're dealing with arrests of university students with your own visa, cancellation of student visas because of your political stance, which is illegal because constitutionally you have your First Amendment rights, travel bans. For example, you may be outside of the United States wanting to apply for a visa, and right now, because of which country you're from, you're not able to get approved for that. H-1B visa changes, including new fees. It is now $100,000 to apply for an H-1B visa, which allows you to work in the United States as a specialized person. The end of humanitarian parole programs, meaning, for example, the CHNV program, which allowed folks from Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela to come in to the United States, and due to what's happening in their respective countries, to be able to come in and be permitted to come into the United States. And those have been cut off early by the Trump administrations. And now you have a whole lot of folks stranded who came here, did everything they were supposed to do, and now that's cut off. I now have to deal with being worried about the detain and the Trump government shortening TPS designations, and TPS is just temporary protective status because of problems going on in your home country, and it is the United States give permissions of folks to stay in the interior of the United States while this is ongoing. You're having these troubles in your home country, and restrictions on foreign aid, and the pausing of adjudication, the decision making of applications for lawful permanent residency. So adjusting your status here is harder. And as a matter of fact, the Trump administration, as of a few days ago, has been summoning refugees who were approved refugees. So meaning they have been approved for to be refugees in the United States, which is different than asylees. Asylees are for folks who were admitted, who have applied for asylum while they came to the United States, and refugee status is for folks who uh, were admitted and vetted outside of the United States and were allowed in as refugees. And so they're reevaluating all of those, recalling folks to the court, essentially trapping folks who do not have like a lot of representation to be able um, to revet their approval. And then there is also the no bond policy of ICE in the immigration court. So folks who are detained uh, by ICE, mostly folks who came in without inspection, so by through the frontier, through the border, um, are not allowed to get bond, contrary to uh, court orders. But the EOIR has a policy out that no folks are, they're not giving out bonds, which is horrible for folks who are not, which means folks are being detained or have to stay in detention potentially for years while their case is ongoing, even though they may have come here legally through all the processes, such as the humanitarian parole programs or folks who have asylum applications. And so folks have to choose between staying in jail and being mistreated, or continuing on with their cases, which is a hard decision. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact on community, ICE's impact on the community here. And I'm going to talk about some examples of what we are seeing as immigration attorneys, and also some of the clients of the advocates. So we have had a client who went to family tree with their partner, and while the client was inside and their partner was outside, ICE detained him in the parking lot at 11:30 a.m. And by the next day, he was in Texas, leaving his partner and two children at home, 2 and 6 years old. And he was the primary earner. And so before folks have any idea of where they're being detained, contacting an attorney, all of that, they're gone the next day. ICE is scheduling biometrics, which is fingerprinting appointments, and detaining folks when they arrive at their appointments. And ICE waiting outside of courtrooms, waiting to kidnap folks after leaving court. So folks come in as they're supposed to in the courtroom. And right now, what ICE is doing is asking for a dismissal in their case. And people can think that's a good idea because then their case is closed or temporarily closed with the immigration court, or they may not know the significance of that. And so once they either agree or are so confused in that, and their cases get dismissed, ICE is able to take them and detain them and then deport them without a order from an immigration court, without full due process, processing their case, making, where folks are able to say the reason why that they would like to stay in the United States or they need to stay in the United States. Folks are getting taken after that. And ICE is taking people to Texas in a matter of hours. It can be as little as 3 hours, and a lot of times it's sometimes 13 hours, which is still a lot quicker than attorneys can mobilize, submit restraining orders to keep them out of, to keep non-citizens out of Minnesota, in Minnesota, because once they leave Minnesota, it is harder to uh, get them out of detention, and also dealing with bar admittance in another jurisdiction. So judges are not able to make decisions once they leave the state of Minnesota. So folks have to mobilize to move in a quicker way. So clients are also asking what they should do, even if they do have, an asylum application pending, and have work permit written out right now with ICE. Folks are asking, and having to choose between going to work and feeding their families, or risk being separated and taken by ICE and moved to a different state, which can result in um, not knowing how to contact your family, all of those things. So this is impacts our community in a really broad way. And the nonprofits of Minnesota are reacting to this. And in fact, before this, there is a immigration hub rapid response between the 5 major nonprofits in Minnesota. And it is a collaboration between the Advocates for Human Rights, Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, Minnesota Legal Aid, and Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, and Volunteer Lawyers Network. And this is an effort to streamline legal services and having folks not go to multiple organizations to get help, and for it to make referral process easier, folks getting consult, folks getting the help that they need in order to be able to locate their family members and uh, get help. So the Immigration Rapid Response is working together with community organizers to verify raids when it happens, and also decide what legal help that we're able to give to folks. So if it is habeas, meaning challenging the detention of the person itself, or getting bond for them, which again, as I said, EOIR is not granting, is under the, has a policy to not grant bond to anyone. And next, please. So now we can go into the Know Your Rights portion of the presentation. And I want to be explicit when I say that, everyone has rights wherever we are. The Constitution is there for everybody. Folks have rights at work, in school, at home, on the street, in the car. Folks have the right to live their own lives. And so let's talk about the rights that we have at home. So what do I do if ICE is at my door? So one, you have the right to keep your door closed and to remain silent. Sometimes if you crack it open, ICE can take advantage of that and push into, or see it as a sign of consent to come into your home. So you have the right to keep your door closed and to remain silent. And you also have the right to ask to see a warrant signed by a judge. And if ICE does not have a warrant signed by a judge, you can ask them to leave. So in the next slide, I have an example of different types of warrants. So there is the judicial warrant, which is valid and you have to comply with, versus the ICE administrative warrant. So the one with the X on top is the ICE administrative warrant. You do not have to comply with that because it is not one that is signed by a judge. And it does not have the same force as a judicial warrant. So if ICE is only presenting the administrative warrant, you do not have to comply with that because it is something specifically for their agency. And then we have the judicial warrant, and something I want to stress for folks to while you to check on those. So check on that they have the correct address, check that they have the correct date, and check that it is actually signed by a judge. And the judicial warrant will say United States District Court of whichever state you're on, Minnesota, whatever it is to for you to know that which jurisdiction, which state, or which what allows what is a valid judicial warrant. Okay, can go to the next one. So, what can you do if I stops you on the street? First, stay calm and ask, am I free to go? So, and if you are free to go, say, I do not want to answer any questions and walk away. Okay. And if they say no, you can assert your Fifth Amendment right. Say, I do not want to answer any question, and you would like to speak to a lawyer or an attorney. And you can deal with that if you are in custody. So have kind of a number ready that you know that you're able to call, or something that can alert folks of that you're being detained, if that's possible. And then next, we have if you are pulled over while driving. So they do have the right to ask you to identify yourself. So pull over and safely as you can, and show your driver's license. You are able to ask who they are and why you were pulled over, and ask if they have an arrest warrant. And you can refuse for them to search your car. However, they may do it anyway. But you'll have the right to refuse any search of your car. And you can refuse to answer any questions about your criminal or immigration history. So if they're at like, where are you born? You do not have to answer that question. And also, if you're the passenger, you have the right to remain silent and to refuse to answer questions about your criminal or immigration history. And then it's also always good to ask if you're under arrest and leave if the answer is no. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to speak about ICE at work. And ICE can enter the public space of your kind of your rights there. So ICE can enter the public space of your workplace without any permission or warrant. And a public space is where members of the public are generally permitted. For example, public spaces include publicly accessible areas of supermarkets, retail stores, restaurants, as well as building lobbies. But however, ICE cannot legally enter a private space of your workplace without a judicial warrant or your employer's permission. A private space is an employees only area where the members of the public are generally not allowed. And this protection also applies to the private spaces in factories and on farms. And typical private spaces include private offices, break rooms, storage rooms, and back of house kitchens. Indicators that a space is private may include postings of private signs, locked doors, and policies that states that visitors in the public cannot enter those spaces without permission. And you need to actually enforce this. You cannot just put a private space and then folks are coming in and out that don't need to be there. And so it does need to be something that you actually enforce. If you are an employer, you can ask ICE agents to show identification. And if they refuse, you can document their appearance or other identifying characteristics. Next slide, please. If you are an employer, you can ask ICE if they have a judicial warrant and to show that to you. If they do not have a judicial warrant, you do not have to let them in your private space. Again, I've already explained that an administrative warrant does not give ICE the legal authority to enter a private space without the employer's consent. And if you are a worker or an employer, you do not have to answer any questions that ICE asks. You have the right to remain silent, and you do not have to provide any paperwork to ICE. You can ask to have an attorney present. And so if ICE shows up, if an employer, for example, if ICE shows up, shows an employer an administrative warrant seeking a certain person, the employer does not have to, one, say whether a specific employee is working that day, so you can remain silent, or two, take the ICE agents to an employee named on the warrant. ICE does not, one thing that ICE can do is conduct an I-9 or audit. So if ICE wants to see your I-9 forms, it must give you, as the employer, at least 3 days notice. And ICE may ask you to waive the 3 days notice, but you as the employer can deny that request. You must also allow ICE reasonable access for the audit. And one quick thing about I-9 audit. An I-9 audit is when ICE inspects whether a business has confirmed a worker's identity and work authorization. And so the employers must keep the I-9 forms for 3 years after hiring a worker, and things like that. So it's just it's just showing that a business has confirmed a worker's identity and that they're allowed to work. And ICE is allowed to conduct an investigation into that. And the next slide is a little bit on how to help and how to get involved in the community. So you're able to donate to several of the nonprofits. The Advocate, you can donate to our organization, the Advocates for Human Rights, and that's especially important because the government is taking away funding for the states, which some of the nonprofits rely on states funding. And so diversifying the income stream is very helpful. You can help with food drives, donate to different community orgs like CARE Minnesota. And usually I would point out that the Advocates for Human Rights has a volunteer court observation program where you can see and document how judges are in the courtroom, what they're doing right now, how folks are being treated. However, right now, ICE is now barring the Advocates for Human Rights observers from entering the courtroom, which is illegal because these are publicly accessible places. And so folks do have the right to go into a courtroom and see what's happening. But they're not allowing this right now. And you can also donate to ICE bail funds. For the Midwest Bond Fund is live and is able to work in Minnesota right now. So if you feel so inclined, and this is just ways to get involved. This is not me pushing anything. So this is all voluntary. And you can get involved in your community and know these contacts. So if you are arrested by ICE and you're a U.S. citizen, contact the ACLU, the Attorney General's office, and you can contact the National Lawyers Guild hotline, and this is a Minnesota phone number. So if you're arrested while observing or protesting ICE, so you can call that hotline. And if you see any federal activity or have been directly impacted and need support, you can contact the COPAL helpline, which is listed here as well. And COPAL, Monarca, are community organizing organizations and are really in the front lines helping folks to verify when ICE raids are happening and connect with nonprofits. So we're all working together to provide help with folks. And so the Immigrant Defense Network is also a good organization, and it's made up of more than 90 community organizing and legal organizations as well to uh, collaborate and streamline uh, and provide support to folks. And then lastly, we have, how to make referrals. So if we could go to the next slide, you can uh, go to lawhelpmn.org to find legal help for low-income families based on county and issue. There's private attorney list. It is also up on the Advocates for Human Rights website. And if you suspect there's fraud, there's a lot of notarios out there, so folks taking advantage of new immigrants or non-citizens and providing fake help, fake documents, meaning the folks think they're getting actual help from attorneys and uh, applying the quote unquote the right way. However, there's a lot of people taking advantage of that group. And so you can make those reports to the Minnesota Attorney General. And then if you suspect that a child is being trafficked, you can connect with the Minnesota Safe Harbor Network. And again, thank you for being here and seeking a way to educate and know some resources that you can turn to help your community.
Thank you, Louica. We appreciate that excellent presentation. We have a few minutes now for questions, and a few did come in while you were talking. The first one, hopefully, will be fairly easy to answer. How many immigration judges are there in Minnesota?
Yeah, so actually, you'd think that's a easy question. Let me see. You can go to the EOIR Fort Snelling. You can look up EOIR Fort Snelling, and there should be a list, but it changes because folks are let go or and then things are in process. I don't exactly know really how many there are, but it's not a lot.
Not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. I can like look that up really quickly. So
Well, if folks can look it up on their own as well.
yeah.
Another question that came in, particularly when cars are stopped. So you
Mhm.
mentioned that the driver has to show their driver's license, which is something you should have on you if you're driving a car, obviously. But what about the passenger? Does the passenger have to show any identification?
So it's really the driver that is able to give permission for the car, uh uh because and give permission to search. So you do have to kind of give your ID, just identification, but mainly it applies to the driver.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah.
Okay. Another question that folks had was about the I-9 forms, which I confess is a form that I hadn't heard about before all of this activity started happening. So is an I-9 only for immigrants, or do all U.S. workers have that form? And when an employer gets a request from ICE, do they need to give them all of the I-9 forms or just the one about the employee they're looking for?
Well, ICE will have come with that specific request. So, I don't know, it depends on ICE. But excuse me, I wanted to go back to the earlier like question about the traffic stop. Um, ICE does not always listen, so I was just all of these different scenarios, but the passenger does not really have to show ID. It's really the driver, because they're responsible for the car, and they are also able to give permission to search for the car, but I wouldn't really recommend that. But yeah, the passengers do not have to show ID because the driver
Okay.
is the responsible party.
Okay. That's good to know. I think many people are concerned that non-compliance with ICE and using sort of a rights-based framework for advocacy is going to result in violence. Do you have any suggestions for people or any information you can provide on that part of the conversation?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So people are concerned that non-compliance with ICE orders and using this rights-based framework for advocacy ends up resulting in violence.
Mhm.
So do you have any thoughts or suggestions on that?
Yeah, so it's all risk based. So ICE is, going to do what ICE is going to do. And so it's you're not able to control that officer. However, um if it serves you to comply, right, then by any means do so. It's just if you're a non-citizen and um that would certain things you say can affect your case in immigration court and how that happens. And so, any admittance of any crimes that you've committed, or just any admittance, even of being born outside of the U.S., can be kind of like an admittance of being here without permission. So it depends on what you have. So if you have your documentations with you, for example, an asylum receipt, um, uh, document, or something that shows, or your work permit, you can decide to show that. But sometimes it is a risk with ICE agents taking your documents and not giving them back. So a lot of our clients, when they are processed, ICE takes their passports, their identification documents, and will not give that back. And so it is a risk depending on what's happening. It is a choice. So um, staying on topic and not really communicating is knowing your rights is essential, because uh, knowing that you don't have to open the door, knowing unless they have a judicial warrant at your home, is very important, and for you to be able to protect yourself and your person.
Hmm. Yeah. You spoke a little bit about public and private spaces and sort of that distinction. Are churches and schools considered public or private?
Yeah, so that depends on, where uh what is publicly accessible, right?
Hmm.
So, speaking in terms of, inside of a church where folks can come in and go freely without an appointment, those would be public spaces. But if you're to go to the back of the church, to the um, places that are reserved for the um,
Clergy?
uh yeah, for the yeah, exactly, for the clergy or folks volunteering, then that's different, right? That would be like private spaces. So it's really, if a space is able to be accessed by anyone without an appointment, then that's really public space. And so that's why there was these sensitive locations policy that was passed by, which was taken down by the Trump administration, where ICE enforcement would not be happening in those sensitive locations like churches, schools, and hospitals. However, the Trump administration did take down that
Hmm.
guidance to for those sensitive locations. And so um, you can start to um, put in those private spaces, and actually you need to actually enforce them. So yeah, yeah, if it's easily, folks don't need appointments, and if folks are able to easily come in and come out, then these are public spaces that ICE will probably be able to
Okay.
access.
And folks are seeking again some clarification on that car factor because they feel like very private spaces to us.
Mhm.
So if we don't have to open a door to our house, do we have to open the door to our car or roll down the window?
Um, I mean, you can crack down the window of the car, right? For them to be able to see. But yeah, that's a difficult
Mhm.
like it because it has its risks. And so, but however, you are not obligated to let ICE or any enforcement, even the police, give them permission to access to your car, to your car without a warrant,
Mhm.
a search warrant.
And just to clarify again, passengers are not obligated to show their identification.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of these and similar questions, people get into it. There's constitutional observer trainings that are out there. So, Louica, thank you again. I want to thank you for your time. And we're going to turn it to our next speaker, who is Joann Ellis. She is a longtime member of the St. Paul League of Women Voters, and she has been doing constitutional observation and advocating for our neighbors here on the east side of St. Paul. So, Joann, I'm going to ask
Mhm.
you if you can to turn your video on.
Okay. Mm,
This
it
might be okay.
says I can't because the host has stopped it.
Okay. Well, you know what? We will work on that on the back end and we'll just start asking you some questions. So, Joann,
Okay.
you've been doing some work, there you are, as a constitutional observer. What compelled you to start getting involved in that way?
Well, actually, it was I was just looking at my calendar trying to figure out, and it was basically back in mid-November when we started hearing about the ICE agents coming in such large numbers. I am involved in two district councils here on the east side, and we had board members and residents that were questioning and concerned about what was happening and how they could get involved. And so basically, how I got involved was that there was a group of residents and board members from District 1, which is the Southeast Community Organization. We just got together one afternoon at the office. We were trying to figure out what we could do to help the people in our area. And we were able to get access online to the Handbook for Constitutional Observers. If you go through the training, this is what they give you also. I have not gone through the training, but everything you need to know is in this. And like I said, we just went online and found it. And this is the one that anywhere you go for training, they are going to use. So, and then it just we just went out in the community once we heard if there were ICE in the area. And we use our cameras to video and to document what is happening. So,
And Joann, when you say when you go out, do you go out as an individual? Do you go out as part of a team? What does
okay.
that look like?
Um, I do not go out as an individual because we have seen just how quickly things can change in the blink of an eye. So I have always gone out with another constitutional observer. Um, we just get notices on our phone. It's just, I couldn't even tell you. It's just, there are times when my phone is blowing up and they're saying, okay, ICE has been seen at Johnson High School. ICE has been seen at a restaurant over off of White Bear Avenue. And so I just, there's one other person that I work with, and then we just contact each other, and then we just head over separately, but we meet there with our phones ready to go. And it's a safety issue to, I mean, I know people, if you feel comfortable, go out as an individual. I feel more comfortable going with another person, just in case. You never know.
Thank
So,
you. So, why do you think it's important for people who look like you to be doing this work?
That's a good question. Why should people like me look like me? Because I think in it's our responsibility to to protect our community. And right now, I think I may have a little bit more of an edge, although I've been finding out with Susan and Renee, it really doesn't matter. But possibly being a white woman with gray hair, I have a better chance of not drawing attention to myself, and I'm able to film and document what is going on without any harassment from the ICE agents. I personally have not gone up and talked to an ICE agent. I tend to stay back, or sometimes we don't like the within the last week. There was we were told that there were ICE agents at the McDonald's in Maplewood on White Bear and Cope, and I happened to be 2 doors down. I drove my car to there. Yes, they were in the parking lot. I did not see them get out. I sat there in my car for about a half hour. They were there that time, that long too, and then they drove away. What is interesting is that after that, that McDonald's closed down for 2 days, and now they only do drive-through. You used to be able to go and sit inside, and since the ICE agents were in their parking lot, they just do drive-through now. So I'm thinking that that is a way that they are using to protect their employees. Without having ICE agents come into the lobby, they don't exactly see who's working. So,
Right.
but I think, honestly, we're a U.S. I am a U.S. citizen, and what I see happening today is not how I want my country to go. And we need to document this. We need to take pictures. We need to video, and we need to keep this so that when things turn around, because I call Copal and I say, hey, I've been at this situation or this location, and I have video. They either tell me to keep it or I can send it to them, because they're keeping this. Because someday we are going to be able to right all this injustice, and they're going to need the evidence to prove it. Yes.
Thank you. You keep mentioning that you get notifications. Are you part of a text string or a signal chat, or how does that information come to you?
Actually, it's through the district councils, at least the district council that I am with in District 1. And we get, excuse me, we get notifications of ICE sightings in our area. And then that's how I know. But even just, driving around, you see them out there. You can't miss them. They're in those big black SUVs with illegally dark tinted windows. Sometimes it's, if they're parked, I will park. I will call other people and say, hey, I'm at this location. ICE is here. But if they're parked in a parking lot, I park too, and I don't get out of my car, but I do videotape, even if they're just sitting there in their vehicles and stuff. So, but But I think us as a U.S. citizens, we need to do this. We need to document what is happening. St. Paul is not as well, we're nowhere near as intense as Minneapolis, but back on November 25th, if any of you remember, we had that huge escalation on the east side over on Payne and Maryland in the Payne-Phelan neighborhood. And I was at that one. It didn't go down well at all. And also I should say, if you prepare to do this, you should make sure your phone is charged. You should have a notebook with you so you can write details down, like how many vehicles were there and what happened and what time. You should also have eye protection, and you should also have something to protect you, because you're 9 times out of 10 there's going to be tear gas and other things that they shoot into the crowd, irritants that are going to affect you. I also carry a first aid kit with me in my car, just in case I get hurt, but more so if somebody else, if I witness somebody falls down or gets knocked down or whatever, I have some bandages or things that can help them. So those are just some of the things that I carry with me at all times in my car.
Sounds a little bit like getting ready to go on a long hike. It's the same, like,
I know.
Make sure you have first aid, make sure you have water, make sure you have a way to communicate with people, tell someone where you're going, you know, all those general safety information.
Correct.
Excellent. Correct. And Joann, you'd be great to speak to this. People are wondering what the district councils are.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary of being in the city of St. Paul. There are 17 district councils in St. Paul because there are 17 neighborhoods in St. Paul. Basically, a district council is a nonprofit that represents a certain neighborhood or geographic area of St. Paul, and they help. Well, there's multiple things that they do. They help residents if they are encountering trouble, like trying to get a variance or some neighbor disputes. They also work with the city of St. Paul to help improve the roads, to help bring businesses or support the businesses in that district council. They even right now, especially here on the east side, we're dealing with northern iron and environmental issues. So they also deal with environmental issues in your district council, the quality of air, the quality of the soil, things like that. They work with the county to bring services in. It's all, and we're all volunteer, all the district councils except the executive director, which is a paid position. But everyone else on the district council is a volunteer, and you live in that geographical area. So like I am on district council 2, which is the greater east side, but I work for District 1, which is the southeast community. But there's Payne-Phelan, there's Summit U, there's Highland, there's McGroveland, there's downtown. They all have their own district councils. So I think someone put up on the chat, I saw someone put up a link to them. They're always looking for board members, and it's really is a wonderful way to find out what's happening in your neighborhood, but also to be an advocate for your neighborhood and help make change happen, positive change happen. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Joann. And thank you for being an advocate, both for our district councils and also for the members of our community who need our help and our voices at this time. We're going to do a few slides here just to wrap us up. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. We do have some upcoming programs, so join us next month on Sunday, February 15th at 1 o'clock, again on Zoom. We're going to be having a conversation about academic freedom and the ability for professors and students to share their voices in our academic communities. And then on Tuesday, March 24th at 6:30 p.m. at the Roseville County Library, we are partnering with other Ramsey County League of Women Voters to do a program on truth, trust, and the ballot box, understanding election security. League is fully committed to our nonpartisan nature while educating the public on candidates, as well as promoting reliable and secure elections for our country. For more than 100 years, we have studied issues, we have taken positions, and we have taken action. And I ask you to please check out our website to learn more about membership in the St. Paul League of Women Voters. We welcome new members throughout the year, so please do give us a try. And again, I want to give our gratitude to our speakers, Louica and Joann. We appreciate your time and your volunteering to talk with us today and to share information. And thank you all for joining us in this conversation. We will be posting this program on our YouTube page. So again, if you search League of Women Voters of St. Paul on YouTube, you will get this program posted tomorrow, as well as all the programs that we have done previously on topics like infectious diseases and the new Heights development on the east side of St. Paul, as well as a number of other things. But thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. I apologize we couldn't get to everyone's questions, and have an excellent afternoon.